welcome to the latest episode of the Making Lean Fly podcast. And we've got a very special episode today, which we did a little bit impromptu because we've got a fantastic example here of how to really do a Greenbelt Six Sigma project, get great business benefit, but also at the same time overcome some skepticism about taking a scientific approach to problem solving. So we've got three guests with me today, Edwin Berg, Scott Parkinson, who's the star of the show, and James Durowse, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. But just to explain a little bit more about the episode, what we're saying is that adopting the Six Sigma approach to problem solving requires a change in the way that we think about problem solving. Many of us are initially skeptical about making that change. So in this podcast, we're speaking with Scott, a newly certified Greenbelt, actually only a few minutes before we recorded this show, in our Western Approach site, which for listeners who aren't familiar with Western Approach, it's in Bristol or very close to Bristol in the UK. And he's going to explain to us his personal journey through that change curve. So if you're listening for the first time, or if you've listened before and not done so yet, please subscribe to our podcast. Also, there's a video cast. I do not necessarily recommend seeing us as well as hearing us, but if you choose to, you can go on YouTube and see our video cast. But let's welcome the guests. Edwin sat next to me. He's a regular on this show now. Actually, he's part of the furniture. But Edwin, just for those people who don't know you yet, brief introduction, please.
Absolutely. So my name is Edwin. I lead the Lean Academy within GK and Aerospace. I've been doing so for the last 3 years. Actually, I've been active in Lean and Six Sigma improvement for the last 15 years of my career. And one of my main responsibilities is to roll out the Six Sigma program within GK and Aerospace. And I'm therefore especially proud to be featuring in this episode with Scott, who is definitely a good proof point of when we do it, that it actually works. So glad to be here, Philip. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Edwin. And a great job you're doing with our Six Sigma program. And James, maybe you just introduce yourself. You're a first-time contributor.
Yeah, so first time on the podcast here. So I'm James Durowse. I'm a Global Master Black Belt, GK Aerospace. I've been with the company for about 18 months now. And my background Sigma goes back 22 years. So I first became a black belt in 2000. I know that seems like ancient history, but it doesn't mean that I've forgotten what needs to be done. So, and hopefully that, Scott will attest on that basis.
Excellent, thank you. And then finally, the star of the show, Scott, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Scott Parkinson. I've been with Western Approach 9 years, from near the beginning of the project, the A350 project. I'm an MSc engineer, so basically I'm supporting the shop floor in the daily tasks, issues when the issues arise, helping them around those issues, and general quality issues, PPSs, A4s. So yeah, general things like that.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe, tell us a little bit more about, how you got to where you are, because you were telling me earlier in our kind of pre-discussions about how you started as an apprentice and you've worked on the shop floor many years. So you're now kind of in an engineering, almost kind of office-based role, but I think it gave you more of an appreciation of what happens in reality.
Yeah, I mean, I started my apprenticeship when I was 16, and I was working in a small company, 10 people, which to me was the real base of my going forward with GKN, because working in a small company, you've got to do every job. You've got to make yourself available to do every job. If it wasn't, this is not my job, everything's down to you, or sharing jobs with people. So in that experience is really good for me, because bringing it forward to GKN, I know a lot of work that sometimes people are pigeonholed into certain positions, whereas my experience in my apprenticeship, because I did other roles, it's really helpful and brought me forward here. Obviously started GKN on the shop floor as a machinist, then made my way up to PTL, and then made my way into the office where I am now.
Excellent. I mean, that's a fantastic success story, Scott, how you built your career. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the listeners will probably have an idea of what Six Sigma is, or their own definition of it. But I'm interested, James, how would you define Six Sigma?
I'm trying to take away some of the myths. So I go into it and say that Six Sigma is really a story that you're telling using data. And it's like any journey, you know, you start off with define, you know, you've got to have your quest, you know, what you're trying to fix, and then you're moving through, and, you know, so analyze, and you're looking for the evidence. So, you know, it's a bit like some of these, you know, the adventure game and things where you've got to answer puzzles on the way, otherwise you don't get to your destination. And for me, I think that once you can get people to realise that actually they can get to the destination, and it's just through having answered the right questions in the right way with the right evidence, so suddenly that becomes engaging. And then, of course, if you then tell that as a compelling story that everybody goes, I understand that. And in fact, I'd be very surprised, but most Six Sigma projects, after you present them, everybody goes, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And well, why didn't we do that before? Well, I always have a simple answer to that, because you didn't take the trouble to think about asking the right questions along the journey.
Yeah.
And it's always easy in hindsight when you've got a good completed project like Scott's done. But the reality is that had been going on for years, where we're getting, you know, one a year. You know, okay, we wound up having a high spot where there was 4 happening in a year that really drew everybody's attention to it. But the truth is that unless you actually go after some of those and look at them in a different way, you're not going to get to the end of the journey, and these things are going to remain mysteries, and they'll continue to trip you up going forward if you don't.
Absolutely. I mean, that's great. And we, again, in the pre-discussion, Scott mentioned how a lot of it is common sense, and I'm sure he'll come back to that. But, you know, the discussion we had was that actually it's about reawakening your critical thinking. And like you say, using data and really challenging some of the suppositions that people have made, and with data. So as Deming said famously, you know, in God we trust, but everybody else must bring data. And that's really what Six Sigma is all about, isn't it? Anything you want to add, Edwin, to that?
Well, what I like about Six Sigma is that it is independent of the process. So you can predict the quality going with each of the processes by taking the Six Sigma view. Yeah. The Six Sigma quality level of 6 means that it won't go wrong more than 3 out of 1,000,000 times. And that is a really key thing. It brings you from the environment of vagueness to real numbers, real predictability, and that's what we need to have if we want to have a good product with high quality going to our customer. Yeah. So independent of which process it is, you can compare it at the quality level and be very confident of the outcome if you have reached a high Sigma level.
Absolutely, that's really, really good point. So Scott, I think most people are really interested in what is this project, or what was the project that you completed. So could you maybe share with us a bit the project background?
Yeah, project statement basically is we were getting holes, damaged holes in the spars, and this was causing scrap spars. We had 4 in a matter of 7 months. So 4 of these spars were quarantined. Some have come back, 2 are in the middle of being checked. So yeah, that was the basic project, and we had changes within the process which we thought was the issue. And then what we've done, we've investigated, because of the Greenbelt training I had and my 8D training, we managed to go away from everyone thinking that change was the issue to actually finding something else through our testing and everything like that. So which has been really good.
Excellent. And just for people who aren't that familiar with the products that you make here, yeah. So this is for the Airbus A350?
Yeah, this is for the 350. This is the inner spar, which is where the main landing gear is hanging down, all the titanium parts. So our hull damage was caused in areas where there was titanium, which is a harder material. So this is where we were getting our main issues, and this is the expensive areas, we'd say, the cost of the parts, titanium, especially at the moment with the titanium, cost of titanium going up. Yeah. So yeah, this is where the main issues were within the product.
That's fantastic. And you actually came up, I think, with a very innovative way of testing and getting the data, because these are really expensive parts, and you obviously couldn't test on a real part. So what did you do? Maybe explain a bit what you did.
Well, we've got a test stand, but this test stand doesn't replicate the spar in the middle of the air in a jig. So we had to lift we had to make a little stand above the test stand, which give it a bit more flexibility to represent the spar. But this is another key important. It was a team effort. It wasn't just me. There was other people within the team who were doing this. I couldn't do this myself. Within the team, we thought of these ideas. This is what, I think it's very important that we don't just make it one person. It was a team effort within this project. I put everything together and got all the data, but initially the testing was done by some good colleagues within my department.
Brilliant.
It's really good.
Yeah, and I love that, the way that you were able, and again, I think your shop floor experience came in here, but you were able to look at, okay, we're testing test pieces, but we're placing them in a jig.
Yeah.
That's not a proper replication of reality. So, there's a few things in your project, I think, which really stand out. First, the way that you did the project definition to really understand what's the problem we're trying to solve. And then secondly, the way that you gathered the data, take into account that you couldn't do the testing on real parts, and how you really took that time to ensure that it was replicable of what was happening in real life. So I'm very impressed with the way you did that upfront work. So that was great. But one of the things we always do on this podcast and this episode, even though it's a special episode, we're going to do a similar thing, is we try to find out a little bit of a fun fact about the people on the call. So we've had quite a bit from Edwin over the past few episodes. So James, maybe you could share something with us, a fun fact that maybe your colleagues don't know about you.
I have to be really, really careful on Teams meetings that my Pyrenean mountain dog doesn't start barking, so I have to pay particular attention to if there's anybody walking down the drive, because you'll go from absolute silence to suddenly deafening and may not being able to hear anybody. So that's always one of those things I have to be very cautious with, because obviously a Pyrenean, it's only a little dog. I'm lying, by the way, it's a big dog, it's a mastiff, and it's definitely, you can't ignore her when she decides to bark. So that's, I guess, fun, and a nuisance all at the same time.
So it's they often say that dogs reflect their owners, James.
I haven't got white hair.
Well, you can't ignore him when he starts to bark.
I need to be careful in Teams meetings with him.
Very true, very true. And what about yourself, Scott? What could you share with us?
Well, fun fact. Well, my hobby is, if people don't know, and they take the mick out of me sometimes, I'm into horology, which is watches, watchmaking. And people always take them because my timing is always early as well. So it's a bit of a fun fact that I'm into horology. I'm also very honest.
Yeah.
Probably the other way, always early. So yeah, so I suppose that is a fun fact in a way.
No, absolutely. It's certainly something I didn't know about you, Scott. So I know you've always got time on your hands.
Yeah.
I love to hear these little segments of what people do. So I think what would be interesting is maybe you sharing a little bit more of your experiences, Scott. But before I ask you to do that, I'd be interested, James, in your view of how you observed as Scott's coach. How did you see him experience the project?
I think that looking on, you got somebody that started off with a very dazed, confused, where's this going to go? Fortunately, got enough about him to actually go with it and do something rather than sit and reflect and find all the reasons not to do it. Then kind of got to a point where, having done the right things, really didn't know how to put it together and work out how to deal with some of the gaps. A key stage in the sort of coalescing of thoughts, and again, it goes back to that story. Once we've got it starting to look like a story, you could see what the gaps were.
Yeah.
And then I think that made life easier for you, Scott, to actually go, oh, that's what I got it. And why? More importantly, it's not the what's that's got to be, it's why you're doing it, so that you can then get to an answer that's informative and actually does tell you something, rather than it just be, oh, I've done some stuff because I was told to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my take. So I think we got you from somebody who was dazed and confused through to somebody that got over the finishing line thinking, how the hell did he get here?
So I'm interested, Scott, maybe your perspective, how did you personally experience this process?
I think it's because I've got 35 years experience. I think sometimes you think it's common sense, and this project and this course has shown that there's a lot of things they need data, and it's really helped me going forward with PPSs, where I say people say it can't be that, we've been doing this for 10 years. Well, prove it to me, show it to me.
Yeah. Give
me the data, And I think the project was, like I said when I started it, is a key GCAN philosophy I've always had is ownership. When I was put on the project, you've got to take ownership of it. It's your project, with help from James, and then we worked our way through it. Like I said, like James is right at the beginning when I was put on the course and then was at Phil, and I was like, oh my God, 51 years of age. Do I really want to be doing this sort of stuff now? And actually when we come away, and then James has helped me as well, and with help from the team, it's really, it's good, valuable, and I would say it's really helped me going forward when I do my PPSs and help the shop floor with issues. It's really helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, and you mentioned PPSs, which again, for those not aware, it's a practical problem-solving approach. Yeah. You're coaching people in how to do that, Scott. So again, you're able to give wider than just your own impact. You can give out wider by helping and coaching others. So that's really, really great. What's as head of the academy, Edwin? You've seen a lot of it. What's your view of this as a Greenbelt project?
If you take a look in general around Six Sigma projects, very often people tend to get lost. People get overwhelmed with everything that they think they need to do, and they need some guidance. And the guidance actually is built into the framework of the DMAIC. And what we've done is we've basically per phase said, these are the questions that you typically want to answer. And if I look at what Scott has done, he's actually taken that to heart. He's really looked at what is the first phase? It's the define phase. And in the define phase, there is a project definition to be built. And the way you built your project definition was by challenge. You basically said, do I really understand? Can I really answer the questions that are there? Like, what is the voice of the customer? How does that translate into my particular situation? What is the real answer to it? How can I make the problem measurable? What's the KPI that goes with it? And as an example, first you thought, well, the cause of this all is the broken drill bit. You've told us about that. And that's it's more the symptom than anything else, you found out. But then you need to ask the question, right, how do I really measure what's going on? What is the problem really, the problem statement? And what's the KPI that goes with it? And I was thrilled to hear your story around, well, actually, if you take a look at single hole drilling, we're doing a really great job. It's a very high quality level. So that was the wrong answer to the right question. Can you maybe elaborate on that? What are you in your project when you found the real answer?
Yeah, I mean, when we did the study, when hole-wise, it was 4 holes last year caused these issues, but as a percentage over the years, it's 0.01% we worked out. But when you actually define it as a spar, it was 9%. So this is where I'd say I wasn't wrong, but I was looking at it at a different angle. And then with the help of the Greenbelt and James, now I actually looked at, well, it's a 9% scrap rate because it was a spar. But and how many holes we drill in Western Approach as a percentage, it's high quality.
Yeah.
Because of because of the Greenbelt train, I looked at it, well, it's a spar. So now we're looking at a different angle, not just how many scrap spars we actually had. So yeah.
If you take a look at it that way, and if you take then a look at what you've done throughout your project, it was systematically going through all the questions, having conversations with people about what could be potential answers to these questions, what tools could I use to prove or disprove, and you systematically said, yeah, that's now a green, so it's not causing the problem. That's now an amber, we need to do some more testing around it, or hey, we've definitely found something that could be, can we build a test to really prove or disprove this? And with that, it was textbook. It was exemplary, the work that you've done. So I've seen quite a few. And to answer your question, was a bit of a long answer, but to answer your question, I think this was an exemplary way of the way that you went through with a really, really great result. So not only for you as a learning journey, but also for the business, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just picked up on something which is a common failure of, I mean, a lot of the projects I've seen, and therefore, whilst I shouldn't sort of say it's like to be the case, but I suspect it's when people are doing A3s and when they're doing other stuff. I think it comes back to what Scott said at the start. They don't sort out what the problem is. What's the problem? Which I know I asked the question in a different way to you. You asked what's the problem to be solved. I kind of look at it with, well, what are you trying to fix?
Yeah.
But it all keeps coming back to actually, what's the entity that you're trying to get a solution for, rather than the symptoms, because everybody seems to like getting drawn in by the symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're confident we know the answer, but we're not really sure about the question, are we?
Yeah.
And I think that can be the problem. And it's interesting listening to the three of you and talking about the process. I think one of the common barriers of people doing a Six Sigma project is they believe that it's overcomplicated, it takes too long. But I guess you could counter that by arguing, well, if you know the answer already, if you say the answer is very simple, then the project should go very quickly, because you should be able to prove very quickly with data that you're right. And I suspect if people take that attitude and say, right, I'm going to do this project quickly because I know I'll be able to prove it, they'll often find that what they think is right, because the data will start to tell a different story.
We actually have a few of those projects in the Netherlands right now, and I won't mention any names because that would be nice, but where we're showing that people thought, hey, this is going to be an easy one. Yeah. I'm just going to follow what I think is the right course of action. And then we answer the questions, and we simply don't like the answer because the data is telling us it's not true.
Right.
Well,
that's interesting.
Well, when we've met before, I mean, somebody asked the question, well, when you should use hypothesis testing. And I said then, and I'll say again, well, if you've got the data, then test the data. Yeah. And you can do the hypothesis because it takes minutes. So I don't understand, if you've got the data, why you wouldn't test it.
Yeah. One of the things we pride ourselves in the Lean COE is doing what I describe as a pracademic approach, a practical approach, but underpinned by data, the academic side of it. But we're not a university, we're a business, so we want to make sure that it is that practical application. I know it's a loaded question, but please answer honestly. Do you see that we've got that balance right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, a lot of the practical stuff I've learned on this, I've implemented in other places. So I think it's really good. The time I took on the project, sometimes people question that, how long is the project taken, which is understandable. It's away from my work environment. Obviously, if I'm doing this project, I'm not doing my work, but the bigger picture is, it will help me in my own work and my daily job. So I think it's a good thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate that. And let's, we've had a very long drum roll. What are the benefits for the business? You talked about we had a 9% failure rate. So maybe share with us, what's the failure rate now that we're seeing and anticipating in the future? And what's the financial impact for the business?
Well, the failure rate at the moment is 0% since our controls have been put in place. And containment, obviously, first, then controls. We've had a 0 failure rate. And then going forward, we've got a new Siemens coming on site, and they're developing a torque monitoring system. So this has come out of the project as well, which is going to be put on all the machines, which is going to be, so if the drill does go, the torque will pop in, stop the machine before it damages the spar. This is all a development from this project. So we've got a containment, we've got the control in place, but we're just doing like a belt and braces sort of thing. Let's have another protection for the machines, for the product. And we had a cost saving of £120,000 on this project.
Wow,
which is good.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So yeah,
it's impressive, and we normally benchmark around £50,000-60,000 for a project. So that's impressive that you've made such a saving. Very pleased to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I guess we're kind of getting to the end of this now. But what I'd love is some advice from you, Scott. So if anybody's listening who's never done a Six Sigma project, or maybe they did back in the day and they've never reused the learning that they got from that, what would your advice be?
Probably a bit good start, to be honest. Another project, another course, blah blah blah. But in my work now, people come to me now because I know they've done a Greenbelt. They know I understand problem solving, so they come to me now and ask me to run PPSs where normally they wouldn't have, because they know I can actually run it and have the correct tools on board with me, and also it's really, so the shop floors, they've taken it on board. They think, they were probably sceptical as well, but now they know I've got all these tools that when we do a PPS A4, they know they've got someone there who can help, guide. So I think although you might be sceptical from the start, but people do use it, and it's all extra tools for problem solving, which is, I think, it's really good.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Scott. And you mentioned A4 a couple of times, which isn't kind of a standard. We know that A3s are a practical problem-solving approach. You talked about A4s to me earlier, and those is kind of a Western approach developed format where you do 5 whys. It's
5 whys.
Yeah.
So every QN, every oversized hole QN is an A4's raised. So everything that's incorrect, an A4 is raised. We do an A4 first, 5 whys. If the action is found in the A4, that's good. Very simple. You don't require to do a PPS and things like this. If the answer's there, use it.
Yeah.
Don't go digging deeper if you can find the answer straight away with an A4, which takes 20 minutes.
So it's some quick and easy problem solving.
Yeah.
Really engages the shop floor.
Yeah, and this is really developed. Beginning of the project, obviously, we'd have an issue, but we were so firefighting, getting the next spar in. But now the project's matured, we've got the time to raise the A4 every time we have an issue.
Yeah.
And then the intention is raising the A4, 5 whys, doesn't happen again. That is the main goal, which is what we want. We want less scrap, 0 defects. That's what we're all aiming for. So it's very important.
Excellent. Oh, fantastic, Scott. Fantastic. So, great advice, great project explanation. I just want a couple of final words, brief words from James and Edwin, really, just with a question. What advice would you give to people? So, James?
Work out what question you're trying to answer.
Perfect. Love it. Edwin?
Refresh your critical thinking. So challenge yourself. Are you really getting to the root cause? And if not, well, maybe Six Sigma, maybe doing a Greenbelt project is the way for you to really start thinking differently, taking a different look at the same issue, and refreshes the way that you can see problems and their solutions.
Excellent. Great final word. So thank you, Edwin. Enjoyed having you on the show again. Thank you very much, James. First time, won't be the last, I'm sure. And Scott, it's been a pleasure spending some time this morning with you, seeing your project, doing the certification board, and I'm very proud to have my signature on your Six Sigma certification because it's very, very well deserved.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah,
indeed.
Absolutely. So to those listening on the podcast or watching on the video cast, hope you enjoyed this. Hope this special episode gave you a different insight to what we normally do. And remember, it's about changing how you lead, not who you are.